think in about 15 minutes. أو 15 دقيقة. نسخنا دي قبل كم؟ 100 ولا 15. تتصل يعني كذا أشوف Где его это? Его нужно только соединить это. Там этот network, connections.
В общем, вот, я на работе сейчас уже и заканчиваю в 6, потом собираюсь идти на какую-нибудь вечеринку на крыше, вот, со мной, как у тебя день вообще занимаешься?
Wi-Fi. Каким у тебя отключен? Что вы в этом? То тебе показывает WhatsApp, типа общего звука, чтобы подключиться. Как отключиться? Страшно сразу. Я знаю, что должны. Вот. Нужно это. Это какие лапки летали?
Это вот нам
Пухли летали. Может быть, там нет интернета просто. Включился. А вот. О.
А теперь вот
Это
этот
просто
кафе
там.
ты заметил.
Ага. Заметь. Просто нет интернета. Что ты так захатываешь? Нет интернета. Просто не работает. Я не знаю, больше нету хибурей. Это бред. Дятина. Анечка, я сейчас буду вставлять, скажи мне, там что меняется? Чё?
Я.
Сейчас. Как нету, да? Не знаю. попробуй с этим проверить без пустотной. Как он нормальный? Ну давай что-то справка. Не работает.
Короче, он должен им дать Wi-Fi тогда. Мы можем решить эту проблему.
Так, а какой Wi-Fi? Ну да, посмотрим, что есть. Не, ну тут не надо, наверное. Ну-ка, попробуй логин зайти. Вот. Не, он работает сейчас. Есть, да? Этот кажется, ну так, да? Ронен играет на Foxy Planet?
Знакомый, короче, если в голове встретиться вечером, туда-сюда, я не влазь, что-то забыла, куда не пошла. Вообще, кто спать, не вспомнила о нем. Не знаю, что вообще.
Sure.
Like trying to. Make sure everybody knows where it is. אז זה עוד מתעכב, הקודם עוד לא נגמר.
מה?
הקודם עוד לא נגמר, אז זה...
כן, 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 זה בסדר, יצאת משם.
אוקיי.
תודה.
take a look. I just see what we did. It's yep, right here. Room 7, come on in.
This is room 7. FYI. 6 is one more down. I don't know why it doesn't say room 7 here. Yeah, there's nothing that says room 7.
I know. I don't know. Don't ask me. I'm just trying to do the best we can. Okay, so software, how does this work? If you sit here, and now you want your own laptop, or you can use this one? Okay, so why don't you plug it? Let's make sure it works. Sure. I got them to run this long HDMI cable. They were going to put you in the back of the room originally.
Oh, that is
I said no.
really awesome. I'm going to have to hunt my crowd because nobody can find this room.
Yeah, this is a maze.
But at least, I don't know, a piece of paper?
You got the paper here. You'll probably steal one of these. Well,
I was going to do that.
well, they've been written on already.
That way nobody can tell me I have 1 minute left. Room 7. Yeah.
Here, I got Sharpie.
Oh. I remember the plan.
Many Sharpies.
This is room 7. Room 7.
This is the hidden room.
This is a secret room. It's not good if you want people to come.
Only for VIP beginners.
What's that?
VIP beginners.
Yeah.
Ouch!
So can you do me a favor? You're going to do it standing or sitting, do you think? Oh, standing. Just make sure I can see you in frame. Even if you sit, I think you're okay. Come on in. This is 7. We might want to clear some chairs out. Make sure you can get in there. Just make sure you watch the cable there. It's okay there? Excellent.
And we don't get the Wi-Fi here. That's awesome.
Okay, lobby. You see the lobby Wi-Fi?
Wi-Fi should Wiki don't get it.
Wiki.com. Wiki doesn't reach up here. Use lobby. You have to register a username, email. It takes like a minute. That's okay.
וואי, איזה וואו, עושים עבד כל זה כל החברות שלי, יפה פלג, המליצה, עם כולה, Can you please take a picture of us? Because I'm going to be in another workshop, but it's just friend from. call it. Thank you. No, no, so,
What's that?
Oh,
Yeah, if you just make sure no one hits it or anything, it should stream okay. That's a clicker. You can plug it.
Yeah. Library.
Okay, good. Awesome. Looks good.
On a budget airline, the seats didn't play.
Well, I think that works.
Imagine that.
Okay.
4 hours to get here.
Oh, I should shut up, eh?
Yes, you should.
You have to take the
So,
inside
you're gonna post this online?
It's on YouTube
Live,
Live.
yeah.
Wikidata.
That could be anywhere else.
I'll, are you in the time zone?
So you do it over a
I'll try
couple
one
of
of
days,
the
you stop
wiki.
it on the way.
You're from Israel or you're from
No, I'm from LC. I'm on the program.
We're gonna wait for
I'm on the,
one or two minutes more, because people are still finding the room. Wikidata.
Jet
Here.
lag is starting.
6 is one floor down.
Oh, yeah, 2 hours.
right down the stairs.
I'm better actually, this is not the other.
Yeah. Right now, so you get home, I think it's about 5 in the morning, like 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning. So this is your, is your first? First week.
Yeah, no, it seems it's small enough. It's, it's quite actually, I bumped into one of my colleagues who I didn't know was going to be from not colleagues in another museum. We just got off the bus. Oh my god, we're both here. We both swayed out buses to this. But I think we're both in the same mind. Like, next year we're going to do lots of stuff with video. I have a huge pleasure here at my museums. All the million art and writing and we've got an archive. It's actually just saying with media, actually kind of it's like loads of little people doing their things now. It's already out there. Why don't we just and then this came up and we're like, it's just tiny to what we were thinking.
So did you get a scholarship?
No. Yeah, so
So, okay.
no, just come out of the blue. It was kind of weird feedback. And I was like, I was actually the one going, I'm sure I should go because like, go on. And you got some
Using libraries, using Wikipedia as a platform for teaching information literacy. Create uploading content that you cannot access from libraries. It's no password. Library pay our subscriptions to databases. So a lot of what we have is already paid. We use those as citations.
Okay.
Sorry, I do feel a little out of it.
No, I know that's definitely.
So, this is the session for Wikidata for complete beginners.
It has to start.
What has to start?
It's already recording, no, the video.
This?
Yeah, it's recording already.
I have no idea. I'm not in charge of this,
Now
but
it should start because it's starting.
this looks like it's streaming already, so.
It's okay.
Yeah. And so is this.
Yeah, we're good.
So, this is the session for complete beginners. If you are a complete beginner in Wikidata, you're in the right place. If you're not a complete beginner, depending on how much experience you have with Wikidata, this may not be new to you because we are going to start at the very beginning. But we're also going to get to some examples of really exciting things that people do with Wikidata. All right, so if anyone, now that I've explained this, wants to be somewhere else, please don't feel embarrassed. Just get up and go to one of the other sessions. But if we're all good, we will start. So my name is Asaf. I'm Israeli. I'm a long-time Wikipedia volunteer. I also work for the Wikimedia Foundation, and I'm also really, really into linked data. So I enjoy Wikidata and explaining Wikidata, which is why I have been giving this talk all over the world. In addition to being a long-time Wikipedia volunteer, I'm also an amateur digital librarian. For those of you who are into that thing, hello Shola. You've been to this already.
Yeah.
You want to do it again? Okay. So there's a satisfied customer. I run a digital library called Project Ben Yehuda, which is kind of a Hebrew equivalent of Project Gutenberg. For those who know that, it's a repository of e-texts, of texts that are no longer copyright, and it is the largest digital library in Hebrew. And it's completely volunteer run. I'm also a linked data enthusiast, like I said. I'm a lapsed classicist. My academic field was Greek and Latin. I only mention this to guilt myself for not continuing in that. And I also write some software in the digital humanities, which is an exciting field these days, combining computing software tools with traditional study of humanities. So that's the various backgrounds I'm bringing to this, and we'll get right to it. I want to tell you that you are some of the last people who are going to see this slide. I've been using this slide for several years now, but I'm going to stop using it. You are only just still in time to be considered a Wikidata hipster. You know, in a few months to a year, a lot more people are going to know about Wikidata, and when they do, when it becomes mainstream, you are some of the last people that will be able to say, "Oh yeah, Wikidata. I knew about it before; it was cool." So you may still be a Wikidata hipster, but time is running out because Wikidata is becoming mainstream. You've already heard it mentioned like 5 times just in the first session at this conference. Maybe you've heard it in other contexts where you're from. So let's get right to it. What is Wikidata and why should we care? I want to start, before I show you Wikidata, with 3 key problems that Wikidata exists to solve. The first problem is that we have data on Wikipedia and the other projects, but it is dated data. The data becomes out of date, becomes no longer correct, accurate, latest data. This is the Wikidata session. Please join us if that's the room you're looking for. We just started. All right. So 3 key problems. First is our data is out of date, and I'll prove that to you. Those of you who are not Wikipedians may not be aware, but if you go on Wikipedia, say the Hebrew Wikipedia, and you check the population of Tel Aviv, the city we're in right now, the population figure for Tel Aviv is likely to be correct, likely to be accurate. But if you check the population of a not so big town in Peru on the Hebrew Wikipedia, there's a fair chance that population figure will be 10, 15 years old. In fact, the most likely thing is that it would be correct as of the time the article was written, which could be in 2003 or 2005 or 2010, and nobody has ever checked it since, because that's just the natural dynamic. People write an article, people use the source, whatever source they were able to find at the time, and then when the government of Peru has a census, right, a population census, and it has new numbers, new population figures, upsettingly, they don't send us an email, the Wikipedians. They don't, tell us, hey, you need to update Wikipedia, which sucks, right? But they don't send us an email, so we don't get the triggers. We don't know the moment when our data becomes out of date. Our data is correct, and then one day it stops being correct. And we don't know when that happens. So at any moment, somewhere out there, data is becoming out of date, and we don't know, which drives people like me crazy. But also, even if the government of Peru had the progressive attitude of, we've just had a census, let's email the world's Wikipedians and tell them that we have new numbers, even if they were able to do that. And they're not, because it's not so easy to email Wikipedians. But even if they were able to do that, we would still have to do a lot of manual work, because we would have to update the Polish Wikipedia, the Serbian Wikipedia, the Tagalog Wikipedia, with the population figures of Peru. Now multiply that by everywhere else, and that's only for population figures. What about a new mayor being elected? We just had municipal elections here in Israel. Hebrew Wikipedia is up to date, because Hebrew Wikipedians, 90-something% of them live here and are aware of these municipal elections. But how up to date is the Tagalog Wikipedia about Israeli mayors? Probably not very up to date. And they don't get an email either. So I hope I've demonstrated to you that we have a data freshness problem, a data accuracy problem. The Russian author Bulgakov would call it data of the second freshness degree. Second freshness degree. So we don't want that, and that's a key problem for us. The other problem may be less familiar, even if you are a Wikipedian, and that is what I call, confusingly, inflexible ways of lateral queries of knowledge. What does that mean? I just mean cross-cutting queries, lateral queries. So we have a lot of data on Wikipedia, and we don't have good ways of getting that data out of Wikipedia. For example, if I want to know who are some Nigerian authors, can I get that from Wikipedia? I'm actually asking you.
Yeah, you can get through categories.
Yeah, I can get that from Wikipedia. Wikipedia has, maybe some of you haven't noticed, at the bottom of every Wikipedia article, there are categories. So I can just go to, I don't know, maybe the one Nigerian author I can think of. The bottom of the article would have a category called Nigerian authors or something like that. And I could click that category and get a list of 40 or 200 other Nigerian authors. Great. What if I want a list of German poets? Same thing, there's a category, German poets, no problem. What if I want a list of German poets born in Romania? That's not an unreasonable thing to be interested in, right? Now, there may be a category, maybe someone made a category called German authors born in Romania, maybe. But if nobody's made a category and bothered to classify it, I cannot get that from Wikipedia. Is the information in Wikipedia? Yes. The articles that we have about those German poets will no doubt mention that they were born in this city, in this place, in Romania. But I can't get it from Wikipedia. I cannot get that information from Wikipedia easily. Even if someone made a category for German language poets from Romania, I could, I hope you understand, complicate this arbitrarily and reach very quickly the limits of categorization on Wikipedia. What if I want a list of painters who might have known Michelangelo? Painters who might have known Michelangelo. So painters who lived between this year to that year and hung around Florence and Rome, right? Yes, you have a question?
No, I just want to answer. There are some tools which enable cross-cutting categories and getting information from various categories.
Yes, that's correct. So categories are limited and have been limited for a long time. So years ago, the volunteers have written tools that give you the ability to intersect categories. So you don't have to have a category. You can give the tool the task of doing the work. Like go through all the German poets and go through all the people born in Romania and give me the intersection. There used to be a tool called CAT-SCAN. Recently it was replaced by a really fabulous tool called PET-SCAN. Those of you who are into that kind of tool I encourage you to look for PET scan, and maybe, I mean, I don't think it's in the program this conference, but maybe we'll find an opportunity to do an impromptu demonstration of PET scan. It's a really wonderful tool. So yes, there are some ways to get around that. Yes?
How do you create a category that's not there?
On Wikipedia, you can just create a new category, like you create a new page, and then classify existing pages under that category. So that's something that can be done, and I won't show it right now because that's not the topic of this talk. But yes, categories can be created, but like I said, if I want a list of people who were born in Paris, lived in Zurich, and died in Moscow, I just made that up. It's not a reasonable thing to expect a category to exist for. But today, this is my research question. Okay, so categories will never be, even if we create a lot of categories will never be enough to answer the weird questions I may want to ask. Now, I call this a key problem. You may be thinking to yourself, well, Asaf may just ask weird questions. I don't feel it's a very key problem. I have managed to live my life so far without feeling this to be a big problem. To which I say to you that for centuries, people have not felt a burning need to be in Australia tomorrow, because it was so far out of the realm of possibility that nobody did it. Nobody felt it was a need. But now that we have airplanes, suddenly some people at least have the need to be in Australia tomorrow, right? So because you don't have the ability, you don't feel it's a problem. You know it's impossible. You're not even asking the question like, I don't know, who are some Russian-speaking people Michelangelo might have met? That's a question that can be answered if we have the data arranged in a particular way. And the third problem I want to talk about today is correlating data from different sources is hard work. Those of you who have tried will probably agree with me. So we have already all kinds of databases. We have national libraries and museums and heritage authorities and all kinds of, I mean, this conference is all about institutions that have data, that have information. But trying to figure out whether this person is also that person in that other database, or this mention of this town is that other town. I just read in the newspaper a few days ago about a Hebrew poet who was born in Mikhailivka in Ukraine. That's the name of a village in Ukraine, Mikhailivka. Mikhailivka after Mikhail, right after the Saint Michael. Now, it turns out there are 118 villages named Mikhailivka in Ukraine. 118. Which one of them was this poet born in? No idea. What the sources say is he was born in Mikhailivka in Ukraine, as though that's, you know, unambiguous, but it's very ambiguous. We have information about all these different Mikhailivkas, but which one of them is the one the poet was born in? Yes, you have.
This is what we call the semantic web, the third point?
Yes, so the semantic web is one approach that was attempted to solve these problems already in the 90s. And the term semantic web has kind of been phased out, and now we call kind of the same technologies and approaches linked data. And so these three problems have one solution. And that solution, from our perspective, from the Wikimedia movement perspective, is an editable central storage for structured and linked data on a wiki under a free license, which is a long way of saying Wikidata. That's what Wikidata is. It's an editable central storage for structured and linked data on a wiki under a free license. Now, the fact it's a central storage, of course, speaks to the first problem of not having to update the population of Peru more than once, right? We want to update it once and be done with it. Probably someone in Peru, or at least speaking Spanish, would notice that there's new data, they would update it once, and all of us will benefit from the fresh, tasty data. It needs to be editable, of course, so that we can update it. We want it on a wiki because we are wiki animals, and we want all the benefits of a wiki. What are the benefits of a wiki? It's great for collaboration. As we know, wikis have made Wikipedia possible. It clearly works. It gives us all kinds of features that a wiki has. I don't know how many of you are experienced with wiki features, like discussion pages, like history and diffs, accountability. I know who did what and when. I can undo things that I don't agree with. I can block vandalism. All of these tools that wikis have are available to me in Wikidata because it is a wiki. I can add certain items to my watch list so that I can keep track of the things that interest me. These are all standard wiki features that are still available to me. It needs to be under a free license so that other people can use the data that we gather, just like Wikipedia is under a free license. Wikidata is under a different license. Wikipedia is under the CC BY SA license, Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike. But Wikidata has a different license. It is the CC0 license. CC0 license, which is a legal device designed to be equivalent to the public domain. So believe it or not, some countries don't have the legal concept public domain or pose all kinds of limitations around it. So the good people in Creative Commons have created CC0 as a legal text that basically guarantees you all the freedoms that the public domain gives you, which means it belongs to everyone. It belongs to all of us. You can do whatever you like with it. You don't have to provide attribution. You can sell it. You can do anything you want, just like with things that are out of copyright. So all of Wikidata is available to you with absolutely no conditions. Use it in good health, for good and not for evil. Technically, you can actually even use it for evil. But don't. All right. So, but the most important thing about Wikidata is that it is a repository of structured data, and that this data that has a structure is also linked and interlinked. One piece of data is linked to another piece of data, and that's where the magic happens. That's what makes this data more than a database, because we've had databases since the 70s. Linked data is where the magic happens, and now we will proceed to see it. In short, Wikidata is love, and I hope by the end of this talk you will agree with me. So, let's dig into what is structured data. The base of structured data on Wikidata and elsewhere is this structure with three parts. These statements that have three parts to them. In Wikidata, we call those three parts items, properties, and value. For those of you who may be familiar with other linked data sets, you may have heard subject, predicate, object. They are analogous. We call them item, property, and value. So an item in Wikidata is anything we may want to describe with data. Anything we may want to collect data on. Anything we may want to describe on Wikidata is an item. So Tel Aviv is an item, the mayor of Tel Aviv is an item, a certain poem by the national poet, the individual poem is also an item, the religious concept of redemption is also an item. Anything and everything can be an item. Anything that has a Wikipedia article can definitely be an item, but even a lot of things that aren't Wikipedia articles can also be items. Anything we may want to describe with structured data. And how do we describe the items? We describe them with a series of properties and values. Properties and values. The properties are, every property is a specific kind of information that we may want to describe something with. So, if I'm describing a mountain, I might care about its height. The height is the property. The value is the actual height of the mountain, like the number of meters, right? If I am describing a country, one kind of property would be the capital, right? That's the kind of thing we want to know about a country, and the currency and other things that we want to know about countries. Those would be the properties. The values would be the actual value, right? So the capital of Germany is Berlin. Berlin is the value. The property is capital of, the value is Berlin. Okay? So you can think about it like a personal information form or a government form of some sort, right? Imagine this kind of standard form for personal information. The item, like, is the person that this form is about. I'm describing some person here. That's the item. Every field in the form is a property. Name, address, phone number, these are properties. What I'm filling in the form, that's the value. Okay, does this analogy make sense? right? So the whole form is the item. That's a set of things that describe, in this case, a person. But I could imagine a form that describes a village, right? In some, I don't know, census database. So items are described by a series of statements. Each of them asserts a single piece of data about it. The statement that says that Berlin is the capital of Germany, that's all it says. It doesn't say anything about the currency that they use in Germany. It doesn't say who the Chancellor is. Yes, we're breaking. Good. Okay. Where were we? Yes, so the statement has only one piece of information in it. We don't use the same statement to express more than one piece of data, but we have many of them. We have hundreds and even thousands of statements about certain items. Or an item could only have one or two statements about it. Right, so we can describe things with more or less detail as we do in an encyclopedia. So we now have a break. I want you to have the break, have tea, coffee, and apparently delicious food. Please try to be back here in in 15 minutes. Let's agree on at least under 20 minutes, okay? I understand there may be a line or whatever, so you may need a few more minutes, but let's be back here so that I can actually show you Wikidata in about 15 to 20 minutes. That would be, it is now exactly 11 a.m., so 11:15. There's food, there's tea, I don't know. Yeah, but if you come back in 15 minutes, I'll be here.
Can we drop
So,
I think so, yeah. I mean, we own the place.
To stop it? I don't think so. We don't need to touch it.
הוא לא מסובך, אבל הוא לא טריוויאלי, זאת אומרת, זה לא קצת טוב, זה דיון להגדיר פה חדש. בגלל שלא רוצים כי מה שקורה, יש היום כבר עכשיו איזה 4,000 או 5,000 פרויקטים שונים, מוגדרים כבר. ולא רוצים שכל אחד שבא ליחידת יגיד, אין פה סלפון, אז אני אגיד פה, ואז אתה יכול למחוק את זה ולהכין את זה.
אבל יש מכניזם איך הוא קבוצה.
יש דף כזה מיוחד פה. שבו אתה ראית את זה? property proposal?
ראיתי לפני שנה, זה יכול להיות שהדברים השתנו, אבל למשל ארגון, יש הטיה לארגוני ספורט, משום מה. זאת אומרת, משום מה, אנשים שמשוגעים על פוטבול או משהו כזה, יתרחשו על זה, ואין...
לא, אז כמו שאמרת, זו לא הטיה מכוונת, זה פשוט...
לא, בסדר.
אנשים שאוהבים ספורט, טרחו ועשו את זה.
לא, פשוט יש לי איזה מאגר על תנועת נוער בברזיל. ואז אמרתי, אוקיי, אני אקח ארגון, ומהארגון אני מוציא סניף, עיר, מדריד, וכל הדברים שאני עושה סביב. אבל היה נראה בלתי אפשרי.
אז אם חסר לך משהו, אם ממש חסר לך איזשהו פרופרטי כדי למדל את הארגון, אז בהחלט אתה יכול להציע פרופרטי שחסר. אין בעיה, יש דף כזה שאתה אומר, אני רוצה שיהיה גם מספר סניף. ואתה מסביר למה, אתה נותן דוגמה, אתה אומר, הנה, אתם רואים פה ברזיל. התהליך הזה זה פשוט בדף בוויקי. אתה עורך את זה ואתה אומר, I'm proposing this property, here's an example item, here's what it would look like, here are the valid values, I expect it to be a number, or I expect it to be a string. וזהו, אנשים ידונו בזה, יכול להיות שיגידו לך, אתה יודע מה, יש כבר, לא שמת לב. אני אומר, זו תשובה אחת שאתה יכול לקבל, יגידו לך, הנה זה, הפרופרטי הזה. או שיגידו לך...
בקלות אתה מקבל את 4,000 האלו, זאת אומרת...
כן, אז יכול להיות שפספסת. אז יגידו לך, הנה יש, או שיגידו לך, וואלה, באמת חסר, ונעשה, אין בעיה, זה לא תהליך...
אגב, אולי יעניין אותך לדעת שיש ג'ודאיקה אירופאן הולכת בשלב 2. לפני 10 שנים היה שלב ראשון. עכשיו, יש לנו משהו שנקרא ג'ודאיקה בי, ויש אנציקלופדיות פתוחות, כ-RDF, זה מינקדן. אגב, זה הבחור שהיה תלמיד של קריס גיזר, שהקים את הדיביפדיה. הוא היה בצוות, גם כן המפה של המינקדן, זה KL. כאקל,
חי אקל, כן, הוא היה ב-Library Link Data Incubator Group שהייתי.
אז הוא יושב עכשיו בסטוטגרט, הוא עבר ממאנהיים, הוא היה קודם אפילו, הוא היה במאנהיים, פיצט היה בפרי אוניברסיטת ברלין. וקיי ממאנהיים עכשיו הוא בסטוטגרט, עכשיו הוא פרופסור. והוא מחזיק את השודאיקה לינק. זה כאילו יוזמה שלי שבו בעצם זהו המחזיק. ואז יש אנציקלופדיה שודאיקה, איבו אנציקלופדיה, אנציקלופדיה של יהודי ברית המועצות, וזה יכול להיות בהחלט צריך לחשוב איך מפיצים לאנשים שבסביבה הזאת מעוניינים בתחומים יהודיים. כיוון שהם יכולים לקחת את הנתונים וממש להשאיר, כאילו אנציקלופדיה הוא אדיר, ממש מצוין. טוב, אני תיקח את הקפה שלך.
כן.
חזרתי אליך?
תודה.
אוקיי, אין בעיה.
Yes. Good question. Yes.
Can we walk and talk? I'd like to get to
in time. So,
How did you get on the Wi-Fi? I missed that. The Wi-Fi? What?
the network is WIKI, but sometimes disappears from the list of networks.
Okay. That's why. Thank you. And then this is the password?
I'm not connected. The password is yes.
Okay. Thank you
2020,
so much.
2020.
Hey, hi.
Oh.
Sorry.
It disappeared.
Yeah, and then
I didn't.
I tried typing it in.
Got it?
No, it didn't. I tried typing it in, but
I was connected, but
I think I can go to lobby.
I'm Anna. It's nice to meet you. I'm from McGill in Montreal, and I'm from Stanford in California. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What is Stanford doing with data?
Well, we are running it. We're trying to use the data just to describe our library resources for like the same exact reasons that I was talking about. And so I'm giving the talk tomorrow.
Okay.
And so we want to use Wikidata to help us describe. So that I think is doing.
Are you involved in with grid frame?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'm a librarian. Yeah, I'm like dual trained as an archivist, and right now I'm more of an archivist. So
I'm sorry, are you a librarian? I'm a librarian.
You are?
I'm at Stanford in California.
Oh, how fantastic! I'm Kansas City.
Oh.
I'm in Montreal.
So I archive really interesting because I've been reading about the SNAP project. Are you involved in that? It's this name authority project, where some of the archival conventions they control the names inside, but they don't share. They don't share archives.
Yeah.
So what's
Yeah,
your
that's cool.
involved in Wiki, all things Wiki?
We want to use, we recently, McGill, for like the first time, McGill has a bunch of different archival softwares, like lots of big things. So for the first time, we sort of brought all of our descriptions together and tried to harmonize our descriptions and then put them into databases. So basically, right now we're using, in Canada we use RAD, which is a very particular Canadian like metadata standard just for archival descriptions. But we use ADAM, Access to Memory, which is again another Canadian like open source archival software. And there's a lot of American institutions that use it, but in Canada and Europe it's really popular because it's a bilingual. So we're funding with that, and now and it's kind of like putting all of our like just like bringing.
Azap? Have you ever presented this directly with institutions or only for the movement of volunteers?
It wasn't a specific institution, but I presented it at the Digital Peace Conference in Estonia in 2017.
Structure. So we're not thinking about linking to any sort of commons project yet. Like it's not really digitization.
So I did deliver it in a couple of professional conferences that were not movement events. I don't think I personally delivered in a particular institution. Maybe I have.
Yeah, that's so. I think of all the things you could link up.
Yes, I think here at the National Library of Israel at some point.
Okay, that's interesting. Because in France we don't have a real presentation of Wikidata.
We don't have a what?
A real presentation. Slides for Wikidata, because when I speak with GLAM institutions, I present Wikimedia projects, I present valorization, etc. So Wikipedia Commons. But Wikidata is very technical, so I can't present that. And we don't have this kind of presentation, and I should be very interested to show that in that way, very basically.
I think it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, these are on Commons. You're welcome to take them, translate them, adapt them. I know that, well, some, I mean, there's lots of Wikidata contributors in the French community.
Yeah, there is Sylvain, there is
Nicolas, Harmonia.
Harmonia.
Yeah.
But they are not in connection with the institution when I have a meeting with an institution.
Right. Maybe you could work with them on how to develop the ability to present this.
First of all, I can present like that, and then I can organize a
And
meeting
then when
with
they're ready to
Harmonia.
talk about exchanging data, etc., you can connect them with a more technical one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Were you talking about those slides?
What? Sorry?
Were you talking about
Yes, those slides, yes.
So we can translate it in.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
The slides are already on Commons, and they're linked from the program.
Perfect.
Okay. Looks like most of us are here. Most of us are here. It is 11:20, so we will move on. I am duty bound to remind you that we are not to bring drinks back into the rooms. So please take a moment to get rid of the drinks that you brought.
Even more?
Yeah, I don't know. It seemed like a blanket statement.
Everybody else is leaving it too fast. Thank you. Like theater books.
Yes. Lusophone means Portuguese language. Yes. Lusophone means people who speak Portuguese. Yeah, if you want to go to that, feel free to just pop out. No, this is
That's what I do. Otherwise, how to carry.
no, we're sticking to the schedule.
So like, where can go here?
Yeah. One floor down. Very close to the registration. Okay. All right, let's move on. So, I'm bringing you back to this analogy of a form. The entire form is describing an item. It is describing it in the terms of properties and values, or if you want to think about it as a form like field names, and then what you put in the fields. So, as we said, different items will have different relevant properties. It's not a set form for everything. So an item about a country, we would want to describe in terms of population, anthem, borders, capital city, gross domestic product, and hundreds of other things we may want to say about a country. Whereas if we're describing a person, we want to say date of birth, date of death, citizenship, languages spoken, religion, father, mother, right, all kinds of things like that, some of which are not, relevant for a country, right? Most people don't have anthems, right? Countries have anthems, people don't have anthems, and it's kind of nonsensical to speak of the occupation of a country, like the profession, I mean. Actually, in Israel there is occupation, but let's not go into that. So we have to use the appropriate examples, the appropriate properties for the item that we are describing. So here are some actual structured data statements for us to practice our understanding. Remember, item, property, and value. If I'm to describe the Earth, the topic I'm describing is planet Earth, I can say that the Earth's property highest point has the value Mount Everest. That answers the question, what is the highest point on Earth? Where is the highest point on Earth? The answer is Mount Everest. But Mount Everest itself is something that I may want to describe on its own.
And so in the second statement, this is a separate, different statement. In this statement, Mount Everest, the same Mount Everest, now it's the item. Now it's the subject that I'm describing. And what I'm saying about Mount Everest is that its elevation above sea level, that's also a property name, its elevation above sea level, has the value 8,848 meters. Now, this may sound similar to the first statement, but it isn't, right? The first statement was about where, this is about how high. Completely different piece of information. And I want you to pay attention that this piece of information doesn't belong on Earth. Earth doesn't have an elevation above sea level, right? Think about it. It's nonsensical to talk about Earth's elevation above sea level, right? We can only talk about a particular point's elevation above sea level. So that's why this piece of data belongs on this item, not on the item Earth. The item Earth tells us what point is the highest, and this is a link to an item. And that item has its own data describing it. This is where the magic is. This one statement linked me to data elsewhere. Okay? So that's why we keep the data in the relevant place. Now the third statement is again about the Earth. It's a different piece of data about the same item, the same topic, the Earth. The Earth's deepest point is the Challenger Deep in the Pacific Ocean. And the Challenger Deep itself, as an item, has the same property, elevation above sea level, and the value is minus 11 kilometers. Right? Elevation above sea level, minus 11 kilometers. Why don't we say elevation below sea level or depth below sea level? Because measuring heights makes sense to measure, you know, in both sides of the zero, right? Positive and negative, instead of having a separate property for positive and negative values. So the elevation above sea level is minus 11 kilometers. So we saw here 4 statements about 3 different items: Earth, Mount Everest, and the Challenger Deep, using 3 different properties: highest point, deepest point, and elevation above sea level. Yes, you had a question.
Sorry, just a quick one. So this is how actual geographers refer to it's whatever below.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
So
you know, in
refer to
casual
how-
speech,
yeah.
none of us would say
Right.
it is elevated minus 11
But
kilometers.
a geographer would
But
say
that's-
the
that's a-
elevation above sea level is negative, whatever.
Right. And also it helps if you want to do calculations, right? If you want to say how much higher or deeper one thing is from another, it helps when you can just do a simple addition
Yeah.
of that one property instead of
Yeah.
2 different properties.
Even I can see lots of interlink also there in the statements, like the meters. Meter is the unit of measurement.
Yes,
So
but it's not a link here.
it's not a link.
No, here it's just a number with a unit.
No, the
So-
unit is itself a Wikidata.
Yes, it is described on Wikidata, but here, do you want to share this conversation with us, or
Sorry.
because it's distracting to others?
Yeah, I agree. No, sorry, my question, like the point of my question is just that sometimes I wonder when you're entering in values like this, sometimes there's no, like, if you're cataloging, for example, in archives or libraries or whatever, you have like your data is structured in a certain way, you fill in those certain areas.
Yeah.
But you also have a syntax for how you enter in a value.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering where the syntax for entering in that value came from. And if you were just like a casual user doing Wikidata, you wouldn't actually really necessarily
That's a
know,
very good
right?
question,
Yeah.
and I'll answer your question as well.
Sure.
So these are not made up property names. You don't just sit in front of Wikidata and say, what shall I call it? I'll call it elevation above sea level. This is one property out of a set of given properties. We currently have, I think, about 7,000 or 8,000 properties on Wikidata. So there's plenty to choose from, and you can add properties, but you don't get to add a property. The community adds a property. Meaning, if you find that in order to model something, you know what, I need, I don't know, a branch number, or I don't know, biological thingamajig, and I don't have a way of expressing the thingamajig, you can talk to the community. It's a wiki, remember? You can say, hey, we're missing a way to model biological thingamajigs. What should we do about that? and the community has a conversation, and at the end of that conversation, a property is created. And from that moment on, it's one of the possibilities. Okay, so that does regulate how things are expressed. And Wikidata itself will try to help you not input invalid values. So that's your question. To your question, sir, about the meter itself, the concept of meter is also an encyclopedic concept, right? Every encyclopedia would have an article about the meter. Even Americans, right? Yes, Wikidata does have an item describing what a meter is, when it was invented, you know, how long it is in other units, etc., etc. But here, we're just using it as a unit, like using kilometers, like using ohms or amperes to measure things. So here, it's just part of the value here. Because to just say that the elevation above sea level is minus 10,994 would not have been enough, right? Because Americans would assume it's feet, right? So we have to specify the unit. So this is like part of the value here. You cannot just have a naked figure when you're talking about physical quantities, right? They always have to have a unit. All right, so does that answer your question?
Yeah.
But separately, yes, there is an item called meter, and it can be linked, it can be referred to. Yes, you have another question.
And if I tried to put in that number in feet?
You can.
Okay.
Yes, so if the data you have is in feet, you can specify, you type the number, and then you select the unit, and the unit is feet.
Oh, yeah, you have to see, yeah, you're right.
All right. Okay. So another way of looking at the same four statements is this. We can say, all right, about the Earth. What can we say about the Earth? Well, its highest point is this, its deepest point is that. That looks more like a form that we were talking about, right? I have a bunch of stuff about the Earth, and I'm just stating it. Property, value, property, value. This will come in handy in a little bit, this form of looking at it. Here's another form of looking at it. It's the same four statements, but this time with numeric IDs. The same exact four statements, except now when we say Earth, we say, parentheses, Q2. And when we say Mount Everest, we say Q513. When we say Mount Everest again, we still say Q513. Whether it's the value or the item, whenever, anywhere on Wikidata, we mention Mount Everest, we always call it Q513. That is the permanent identifier. Most of you know the value of permanent identifiers, right? This is the permanent identifier of Mount Everest. No matter the context, whenever we mention it, it'll be Q513. Now we want to say something else about the Earth, it is again Q2. That's the ID of the Earth. And the properties also have numeric IDs. They begin with P for property, P and a certain number. And when we use the same property, elevation above sea level, P2044, when we use it again, it is still P2044. Okay, so every item and every property has an identifier next to it. This is actually what's in the database. That's what Wikidata is really like. Triples of identifiers. All right, Wikidata doesn't need our squishy human speak. Wikidata just says, all right, Q2 has property 610 with value Q513. Done.
Okay.
Right? This is, however, a little difficult for us squishy humans. So as a compromise, Wikidata lets us use this kind of mixed mode. So most of the time, we can refer to things with our squishy human names, knowing that technically in the database, it's always stored with these numeric IDs. Why is that a good idea, to use these numeric IDs? I'll demonstrate. When I say to you, London, you are immediately thinking of a chicken restaurant in Hong Kong, right? No? Oh, okay, you're thinking about the town in Ontario, Canada, right? Or the American author, Jack London, right? Or, oh, yes, there's also the British capital. Yes, there's that as well, right? So names are ambiguous, right? And there's any number of books called London, there's movies called London, documentaries or whatever. And yes, there's also a chicken restaurant in Hong Kong called London. I visited. So, what?
That way you can identify the item.
Yes, so because human names are ambiguous, we say London and we might mean all kinds of things. And also, at the same time as they are ambiguous, they're also redundant. Because we call London, England, London, but the French call it Londres, right? And other languages have other names for it. So actually we use more than one name for the same thing, and we also use one name for more than one thing. Humans, squishy, like I said. Yes?
Mike, well, for you, how do you deal with things that change over time? So London, if it had changed its name at this point in time, it is, or a company at this point in the company's history, it was called this.
That is an excellent question. How do we deal with changes? Stuff changes. A company becomes two companies, or changes its name, etc., etc. The short answer is it's difficult. The longer answer is there are ways to model these changes. Wikidata actually has fairly nuanced ways to model data at almost arbitrary granularity. So if you care, if you really want to explain, well, this company started out being called A, but then it was renamed into B, then it got split into B1 and B2, then B2 went bankrupt, and now there's only B1, you can actually express all that in Wikidata. There are ways to do that. We'll see some of them later on. Okay? So, like I said, humans are squishy, and they use language in really confusing ways. So numbers are language neutral, because Q513 is Mount Everest, right? Mount Everest is what we call it in English. I'm not sure what the Tibetans call it, but I know it's not Mount Everest, right? So we can just all agree, okay, let's just call it Q513. You call it whatever you call it in Tibetan, we'll call it Mount Everest in English, everybody's happy. And of course, it's also robot friendly. When we have numbers, it's easier to crunch with computers. So all these reasons make Wikidata use numbers. Yes?
So, if I may,
I knew this would get a comment from you.
About things that change their names. So very famous case of a place that changed its name is St. Petersburg in Russia. So currently the label is St. Petersburg in English, but it also has a property, official name. And official name has the value St. Petersburg since 1991. And since as a qualifier, did you speak about qualifiers?
No.
Okay, we'll get there. So anyway, it has St. Petersburg since 91, and has another value called Leningrad from 24 until 91, but that's qualifiers and you'll speak about them.
Yes.
Anyway,
Thank you for contributing an example for later. Yeah. All right. So, any other questions so far about what we've covered, or are we ready to actually meet Wikidata? Yes.
Sorry, it's maybe a stupid question, but
There are no stupid questions.
Maybe. How is it organized? I think Wikipedia is like a pyramidal organization. There is categories and subcategories. Wikidata is like tags, or there is a hierarchical organization.
That is a really good question.
Really?
Definitely not a
Oh,
stupid
thank you.
question. So Wikipedia is organized, if you'll pardon the overstatement, in a graph of categories, not a tree, a graph, and not even an acyclic graph. It is cyclic, unfortunately. So Wikipedia does have categories, right? It has, philosophy, and then German philosophy, and then Fichte, right? But Wikidata doesn't have that organization. It's not organized with categories. Wikidata is just 50 million items, 51 million items, meaning we have structured data describing 51 million things. The things are mountains, people, poems, rivers, religious concepts, whatever. 51 million of them are described, some of them with 2 statements, others with 1,000 statements, right? So we have billions of statements in Wikidata. But they're not organized in anything like a tree or a graph. Instead, you get to organize Wikidata ad hoc according to what you need.
Okay.
So the primary way to organize Wikidata is to query it, right? To run a query on Wikidata and say, for example, get me all the rivers in the world that are longer than 100 kilometers. So that's another example of something that's hard to get from Wikipedia, right? Even though the information is there in Wikipedia, right? Every river has its length in Wikipedia. We have the data in Wikipedia, we just can't get it. How can I get the list of only those rivers that are longer than 100 kilometers? I can't from Wikipedia, but I can easily do that with Wikidata. And the way to do that is using a query language called Sparkle. And you are lucky because there is a workshop on Sparkle later in this conference taught by Martin Dammers, I believe. So if you're curious about how to get that stuff out of Wikidata, I encourage you to go to that workshop. Also, if you for some reason can't go to that workshop because you're even more interested in something else that's happening at the same time, you're still in luck because I have recorded my version of a Sparkle workshop on video and it is available. I will share a link, I don't know, at the end of this, okay? But it's available on Commons. I'll actually show it to you. I'll show you my user page on Wikidata, and on my user page there's a link to it, okay? It's a 2-hour video teaching you from the ground up how to query Wikidata. Yes?
Is the workshop going to present us the ways of handling Sparkle, or can we try there as well? We will have our computers there.
Yeah, it's a workshop. So bring your computers. That you will learn technique after technique of doing Sparkle, and you can run your own queries. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a hands-on workshop. All right. Yes.
How is the disambiguation process? Is automatic, of course, and is read in different languages now. For example, the case,
Yeah.
example of London.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So how do we deal with the fact that we have dozens and dozens of things called London on Wikidata? We will see that in just a moment. Okay, we will see that.
Sorry.
Yes.
So you have 51 million items in
Yeah.
Wikipedia now. So how does that, do you have to start from scratch to build all of this into Wikidata?
No, the 51 million items are already described fairly well on Wikidata.
So it's already,
But
okay.
if you come with a research question like, what are the long rivers? You build a query
I
in
understand.
2 or 3 lines. It's not complicated
Yeah.
once you know. It's not complicated. In 2 or 3 lines, you say, get me everything that is a river that has a length of under 100 kilometers.
Okay.
Or over 100 kilometers, right? That's it. These 3 lines are enough to get that list.
Yeah.
All right, so I just clicked wikidata.org. Wikidata.org, that's the URL for Wikidata. I will zoom in a little bit so you can see better. Yes, 51.6 million data items in Wikidata. And if you've never been to Wikidata, the first thing you might notice is that it looks kind of like Wikipedia, just design-wise. There's a sidebar, there's those links at the top there with a username and stuff. The reason it looks kind of like Wikidata is that it kind of runs on the same software. It runs on MediaWiki, which is the wiki software that runs Wikipedia, that Amir is helping make work, especially in everybody's language. In addition to the standard MediaWiki software, it has an additional linked data superpowers component called Wikibase. So MediaWiki plus Wikibase are 2 pieces of software that combine to create the site Wikidata. Again, Wikidata is not software. Wikidata is this site. And it runs on a piece of software called MediaWiki plus Wikibase. Okay? Wikipedia runs on just MediaWiki. This runs on MediaWiki plus Wikibase. And like MediaWiki, Wikibase is free software. You can run Wikibase to run your own linked data wiki if you want. Yes?
I have a doubt about the nature of data. Text, numbers, images.
Yes.
So when we speak about data, we are speaking about all these things.
Yes.
Okay. Can we introduce some kind of query, for example, saying that I want images about the rivers, the best quality image, based on some technical criteria?
Yes. Yes, you can. Yes. Yes, you can query for, so this was mentioned just this morning by Sandra. One of the new things that are added on top of Wikidata is the way to describe individual media objects. That's a new thing. Until now, I've been talking about things in the world, right? Like mountains and cities and people. but now we're talking about describing a file, a JPEG file, right? We can describe a single JPEG file with 100 statements if we want. Like, you know, who made it and when and why and what the material was and what the whatever was and the dimensions and the paint type and what it depicts, right? And it can depict, you know, a lady with a dog and an umbrella, right? All of these things can be listed there. And then I can query, get me all the paintings that depict a dog and an umbrella. How's that? That's not something you can do with Commons today, right? Again, Commons has categories. Maybe it has like pictures of dogs or pictures of umbrellas, but how do I get pictures of dogs and umbrellas, right? So this is the kind of thing we are just now going to begin to be able to do with this latest development that Sandra was talking about. Okay, so let's explore Wikidata itself for a few minutes. And then we will get to see some of the principles we have described. I will sit down to better use the keyboard. Okay, so Wikidata. It's a wiki, like I said, so it has everything we've come to love and expect in a wiki. Those of you who have wiki experience will find your username here. This is my volunteer username. Preferences, watch lists, contributions, etc. This is, I guess, as good an opportunity as any to show you my user page. So this is my username. It's capital I-J-O-N. That may be the one thing you want to write down. I just don't have your email addresses, so I don't know how to get it to you. I can add it into the program, on the conference program. But anyway, if you go to Wikidata, wikidata.org, and then here in the search box, you type user:IJON, my username, you will get to this page. And in this page, you will find all kinds of useful links, including the Sparkle tutorial. Okay? So, yeah. And I guess this is the link to the video. It's right there. The video is right here on the page. You just click play. All right. So back to Wikidata itself, and let's look at Saint Petersburg. Okay, that's what the city is called today in Russia, right? But it used to be called, some of us are old enough to remember, Leningrad, right? So let's make a mistake and look for Leningrad. What would happen? So Wikidata loves us and wants us to succeed. So we type Leningrad, and it helpfully says, maybe you mean St. Petersburg, parentheses, Leningrad. And it also helps us tell apart this Leningrad from other Leningrads, like Leningrad, the band from Russia. Do you know that band?
It's a very famous band.
Very famous band. I did not know the band, but isn't that helpful? I mean, if we didn't have this little line that says band from Russia, imagine that for a moment. We would have had St. Petersburg, Leningrad, 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 Leningrad. Which one is about the band? Which one is about the city? Right? So it's very crucial to actually have these little description lines, that's what they're called, descriptions, because they give us the capsule version of, is this a city or a band? Just to tell apart, very roughly, the kind of thing we're talking about here. So, of course, in this case, yes, I meant the federal city in Russia and the former capital. That's the one I meant, but I might have been looking for the band, right? Yes?
Is there a hierarchy by relevance and in this sense?
Yes, there is. So it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that the city in Russia is the first option I'm presented with, because most of the people who type in Leningrad are probably looking for the city, even though it's no longer called that, right? Are probably looking for the city and not the band. So Wikidata does collect some statistics, and like I said, it loves you. It wants you to succeed, so it's trying to give you what you're probably looking for. But again, if you're Amir, maybe you are looking for the band, because Amir definitely knows that it's no longer called Leningrad. So if he's typing Leningrad, maybe he is looking for the band. So this is, by the way, a good thing for you to pay attention to when you work with Wikidata. Whenever you start typing and you get some autocomplete options, make sure you pick the right one. Because if you click on the band, you will not learn anything about the city. You will learn about the band. Okay? So, the first thing we saw is that actually Wikidata sends us to the right place. So we click St. Petersburg, and now we come to this item. This is the first Wikidata item that we're seeing. And what do we see here? The first thing we see is St. Petersburg. That's the name, the current English name, by the way, of this city. It's not called Saint Petersburg in Russian. In Russian it's called Sankt Peterburg, right? That's not the same as St. Petersburg. It means the same, but it's not the same, right? So even this little difference matters to Wikidata. Now, we are now in English for everybody's convenience, so it's speaking English to me. But I can switch my interface language to Hebrew, and I will do this soon, you have been warned, and then everything will speak Hebrew at me, and I will get the Hebrew version of this city name. So anyway, this is what we call this city in English, and of course, immediately after the squishy human speak, we get the QID, in this case, Q656. Okay, so anywhere and everywhere the city St. Petersburg is mentioned, it'll be Q656. The band Leningrad, of course, has a different Q number, right? Because it's a different thing. Okay, so we have the name, we have the QID. The next thing we have is this line, this description line, Federal City in Russia. We've already encountered this line. We already know why it's there. That's the line that helps us pick the right item when there's more than one item. So this begins to answer your question about the disambiguation, right? We disambiguate things that have an identical name, not by modifying the name, but by using the description field. And by the way, that's different from Wikipedia. Those of you who have experience with Wikipedia know that if we are describing a person named John Smith, and there's plenty of people named John Smith, on Wikipedia, what do we do? If we want to write about a different John Smith, does anyone know? What do we do on Wikipedia? We use parentheses, right? So we say John Smith, judge, to distinguish this John Smith from John Smith, the zoologist, right? And then we have John Smith, zoologist, John Smith, judge. What if we have two judges named John Smith? We say John Smith, British judge, versus John Smith, American judge, or John Smith, 17th century judge versus 19th century. We literally do that on Wikipedia. Like, we add as much information as needed to disambiguate these identically named things. Now, we do that because on Wikipedia, the primary key, I hope that term is familiar to you from the databases that you use at work, the primary key, the main identifier, is the article name. There are no numbers on Wikipedia. Actually, there are, but we don't use them. So, we need to identify the page by its title. So we cannot document two different people under John Smith. There can be only one piece of content called John Smith on Wikipedia. But again, Wikidata, which was invented much after Wikipedia, so it had the benefit of learning from mistakes, is using numbers to actually identify the item, which means we can and do have more than one item with the same name, as we saw with Leningrad. So all those John Smiths from Wikipedia, all of them will be called John Smith on Wikidata. And the description line will say 17th century British judge or whatever, okay? And that's actually better, right? Because the name of the person was John Smith, not John Smith judge, right? Properly, we are describing a person whose name was John Smith, not John Smith judge. All right, so we get the name, the ID, the label, and here we have a series of additional strings in this case, one of them being Leningrad. And that's the magic. That's why when I mistakenly or outdatedly type Leningrad, Wikidata was able to say, oh, you probably mean this item because this is one of the aliases of this item. So this is another thing that we do have on Wikipedia. We call them redirects on Wikipedia. Again, it's a kind of patchy way to do it. On Wikidata, we have a proper way to do it. We recognize the fact that humans are squishy and have all kinds of names and they change and whatever. And so, yes, even though philosophically it is no longer correct to refer to St. Petersburg as Leningrad, in practical terms, a lot of people will still look for Leningrad. A lot of people are looking at a source that says Leningrad, or someone's birth certificate would say Leningrad because they were in fact born in Leningrad. So we still want to be able to find this city when we look for Leningrad. Okay, so these are aliases. That's 3 pieces of information for the name, the ID, the description, and alternative names or aliases. All of which to help us get to the right item we want. And all this is still not about structured data. This is only just about what to call the item and how to tell it apart from other items that have the same name. Okay? Now, all of this was in English, remember? St. Petersburg is in English, not in Russian, not in Greek. So Wikidata actually has sets of names, descriptions, and aliases in as many languages as we need. In this case, it is using the English one because that's my setting. See, here it says English. I can click that and change to another language. But this is where these came from. They came from this table. That's the label. In Wikidata, we call those names labels. That's the label, that's the description, and these are the aliases. From here, they came up here because I'm using English. If I were using Arabic, a relevant language in this country, I would have gotten this, which in Arabic says St. Petersburg. All right, and the description, and some aliases that, as you can see, these are different aliases. I mean, there's just 3 of them. These are different aliases because maybe in Arabic, only those 3, variants are relevant. I don't know. I mean, people who speak Arabic will be able to say maybe something is missing there. We also have Hebrew, we have French, Spanish, we have a bunch of languages here. And if you look at the list of languages, Hebrew, Arabic, German, Spanish, French, Russian, and Ukrainian. That's a bit of a random list of languages. I mean, Hebrew and Arabic make sense, we're in Israel, but Ukrainian, Italian, but not, say, Tagalog or Japanese. Why is that? The reason is, if we actually click all entered languages here, we will see that Wikidata actually has hundreds and hundreds of languages in which it knows at least what to call St. Petersburg, including lots of scripts I cannot even read. You can also see that some languages, for example Malayalam, that's a language of South India, doesn't have a description. Doesn't have a Malayalam description. What does that mean? It means if I were to type St. Petersburg in Malayalam on Wikidata, I would get a list of several St. Petersburgs, and I will not be able to know which one to click. I'll have to click and see, is this about the city or not? Right? So someone who speaks Malayalam should add a description here to help. But as you can see, for some of them we have descriptions, for some of them we don't, for some of them we have a lot of aliases in Japanese. I guess there are questions of transcription of how exactly to transcribe it into katakana for Japanese, and others we don't. But if every time I open Wikidata, I saw this interminable list of languages, that would be a bad user experience, right? Because most of these languages I cannot even read. I will never care about the Malayalam label because I can't read Malayalam, unfortunately, right? So there's no point in showing me the Malayalam all the time. That's why Wikidata actually pays attention to my user page, again. In my user page, I have actually specified here in this little box precisely the languages I want to be shown. These are languages I can read, and that's why they're useful for me. Maybe I'm trying to translate into Hebrew, my mother tongue, from these languages which I can read, and that would be useful for me, right? If I ever learn Malayalam, I'll add it here, and then it'll be shown in the short box. Yes?
Can we select 2? For example, Portuguese from Portugal and Portuguese?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can select PT and PTBR. Yes, absolutely.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can we? Is there any method where we can find that the items which don't have any description?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. You can run a query.
Okay.
And you can even make it very specific. For example, I want to make sure there are no musicians without a Hindi label.
Okay.
I can do that, or Hindi description.
Yeah.
And then I can work just on musicians because I care about musicians. I don't want to contribute Hindi labels for I don't know, pharmaceuticals. I want musicians or movies or whatever I care about. Right? Yeah. Okay. So we have this big box. if there's a language here that you speak that is missing a description, you can add it by clicking this well-hidden edit button. Did you notice it until now? Yeah, it's pretty well hidden. So if you click the edit button, something amazing happens. Instead of Wikipedia, that shows you a bunch of markup when you click edit, this shows you a vaguely 21st century edit control that you can just type into, you know, like people do in the 21st century. So that's great. If the button was easier to discover, that would have been greater. But anyway, now it's all editable. And if I, for example, found a mistake in the German, I can correct this mistake and hit publish. Publish, right? That's like save, done. If I can speak Malayalam, I can maybe write a quick description, click publish, that's it. Now Wikidata knows what to call this or how to describe it in Malayalam. Great. When do we get to the actual structured data? I hear you asking. Right now. So if we scroll past this language thing, we get to the actual structured data. Now we begin to see what does Wikidata know about St. Petersburg. Okay? I would have used Tel Aviv for the example, but Amir pointed us in this direction. So anyway, the gray area on the left, these are the properties. And the white area, these are the values. Where is the item? The whole thing. Remember, the whole thing is the item. The item is St. Petersburg. And it is described with a series of properties and values. Okay? So, the first property is a very important one. It's called instance of. Instance of. Which is a bit of programmer talk, or ontologists talk, actually, for what kind of a thing is it? Like at the most basic level, at the coarsest distinction, is it a mountain or a city? Is it a person or a literary work? Right? It's an attempt to answer that question. Ontologists would sometimes call this an is-a, right? Like, what is it? So in this case, it's an instance of, actually it's an instance of several kinds of things. It's an instance of a federal city of Russia. It's also an instance of a big city, an instance of the capital of Russia. Is it the capital of Russia? Is it the capital of Russia?
Not anymore.
Not anymore is the correct answer, right? Not anymore, but it used to be. So should it be an instance of capital of Russia or not? There's an ontology question for you, right? It's no longer the capital, but it used to be. So we cannot be satisfied with a yes or no answer here. It neither is the capital, and it is not the capital. We need nuance here. Can we get that nuance? Yes, we can. Already in our first statement, we can look at this nuance and see that the value, capital of Russia, itself has qualifiers. Qualifiers. Okay? So qualifiers are like, yes, but, right? There's context. And in this case, the qualifier is, well, the start time is 1712. The end time is 1918, right? With the Communist Revolution. So between those dates, it was correct to say this was the capital of Russia, capital city, right? But it isn't anymore. Without these, it would just be incorrect to say it's a capital of Russia, right? But with these, it is the most correct, the most accurate way to describe it. So these are qualifiers, or sometimes called substatements, because they actually obey the same logic. These are properties and values. Properties and values. The difference is, these are not properties and values describing the item, the city, St. Petersburg. These are properties describing this fact. This piece of information itself is being described like an item is described, with properties and values. Are you with me? Where's your head spinning? This is the tricky part, right? So this piece of information itself is something I want to describe with maybe not 1,000 statements, but 2 or 3 or 5, as many as I need. Okay, so St. Petersburg is a city and a capital and the second largest city. This is a little confusing and unusual. Most of the items on Wikidata will have one value for the instance of, right? It'll be instance of human, or film, or poem, or something like that. But anyway, after all of these values of instance of, from which we learned that a single property can have more than one value, let's go on and say, okay, what else do we know about this city? Well, we know that it is part of the Northwestern Federal District. So this is the administrative division within Russia, right? And Wikidata knows that. Now think about it. Every atom of information in Wikidata, every piece of data that is structured in this way, enables all kinds of automated reuse. Every piece of data here can feature in a query, or in a map, or in an app that I can build. You know, show me the structure of Russia by districts and oblasts and whatever other divisions they have. It has an image property with a value this. Is this the only image we have of St. Petersburg? Of course not. We have thousands and thousands of images of St. Petersburg in commons. So what is the meaning of having image with a value this? The meaning is, this is mostly for automated use. Because if you and I want some pictures of St. Petersburg, we can go to Commons and get a variety. We can get it by day, by night, in winter, in summer, everything we want. But if I am, for example, building an app, or let's just imagine, or not an app, or my library system, and when I mention a person and a person's place of birth, I want to follow it up with, a tiny little thumbnail image of that place of birth. Wouldn't that be nice? What image should I choose? Commons has thousands of images of St. Petersburg. This is what this property is, right? It's meant to give mostly machines, not humans, like one, representative image. If you need to use only one image of St. Petersburg, this is a good one, says the volunteer who put it in here. We can argue, by the way, and say, no, you know what, that's not very representative, let's pick a different one. But again, for humans, right, if we look at an item about a person, we would want some kind of, portrait, some kind of face picture of the person, even if on Commons, we also have, I don't know, a photo of him being decorated by the president, but in that photo, he's like on his side and, whatever, or we have files of his handwriting and signature. Those are valuable images, but they're not the one image you want when someone mentions, I don't know, Stephen Hawking. You want, the face of Stephen Hawking to be there. That's what this property is for. All right, moving on. Wikidata knows the inception, not the movie. That's just a fancy word for saying beginning, right? The beginning of St. Petersburg is 27th May 1703. We don't know this at this precision level for most cities, but this was a planned city, right? This was a city created by decree, so we know exactly when it was started. And here we have what Amir mentioned earlier. We have a property called official name. Wait, don't we already have all the names up there? Yes, we do, but remember, up there, the only purpose of all those names and aliases and things is to help us find the item and tell it apart from other things. If we want to actually describe the historicity of the data, we need to have an actual structured data statement about it. Do you see the difference? Over there, I just said, also known as Leningrad. I wasn't able to specify, in the past, not right now. I just said, if people look for Leningrad, give them this as well. And by the way, when in Hebrew, for example, when we transliterate foreign names, there's often questions, with an aleph, without an aleph, with this T, with that T, we have the same sound can be representative of more than one letter, problems. So we want to help people find it, whatever transcription we pick. So that's what the aliases are for. But this actually describes a fact about the world. The fact is that this is the official name in Russian of this city from 1703 until 1914, at which point it was officially renamed. So then there's another value. This is the name in German, officially the name in German, and Hungarian and whatever, but we see here that in between 1914 and 1924, in Russian, it was renamed to Petrograd. It was no longer St. Petersburg, it was Petrograd. And later it was renamed to Leningrad. So actually we have modeled, this is to your question, right? We have modeled the historical changes of just this one piece of data of what is the name of this city. that name has actually gone through changes, and we are able to express them in Wikidata if we set our minds to it, and if we use the appropriate and if you use the qualifiers, we are in fact able to present this. Another example of qualifiers that is very easy to understand is when you describe someone who is president, right? Were they born president? No, right? They are president as of 2016 or something, and at one point they will be former president, right? So we will need some kind of property. In Wikidata we call it position held, right? The property is position held. The value can be President of Israel, right? But not just President of Israel. This person isn't permanently the President of Israel, right? President of Israel with start time so-and-so, and when they leave office, in whatever way they leave office, right? Even if they die in office, right? At some point there will be an end time after which they're not the President of Israel anymore. And thanks to that, again, think about automated uses. It's trivial now to a computer to build a timeline of, all the presidents of Brazil, right? According to their terms of office. Yes? I don't know why I switched to Brazil suddenly. Doesn't matter. Yes?
Is the structure of properties permanent, or I can add some options like, what about the cities which have disappeared?
Yeah.
Is there an on-try
Yes.
for that?
There is a property that is the opposite of inception.
We can add or remove the...
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So this isn't a rigid form.
Okay.
This isn't a rigid form. When you create a new item, it's empty.
Okay.
And you begin to add statements, right? So unlike the government form that comes with, a form that you have to fill out, here we are modeling things. We're adding one statement at a time. And if we, for example, don't know the inception date of something, we can just leave it out. Hello. So, let's move on a little bit. Oh, that's adorable. We even know that Russians have a nickname for the city. Peter.
In terms of equivalence, is there a short, obviously an equivalence, the URL at the top there that's great, that's just put there in my system,
Q656.
that's great. If I want to say it's Q65, but at this point in time, is there a short way of doing that with a sort of shebang or sort of
No, you would need to express that in your query. Like if you want to say, what was Q656 called in 1928?
I'm thinking actually more the equivalent, actually I don't want to hold it too much, but that if I've got a system here and I'm saying, is this equivalent to that, it's what I would store in my system to say it's this thing here, without it being a huge, great big, massive
in terms
query.
of like a foreign key for you to store somewhere else, the QIDs are what you have.
Yeah.
Like just the QID. So you would need to somehow construct your own. I don't know. You could save the query URL or something. To if you want to link to specifically that.
Yeah.
But that's I would say a
There's no
shortcoming.
structure for that.
So it's not addressable at the individual statement level yet. But that might be something we add. Yes.
Is there a better way to express that it wasn't named after Peter than the qualifier excluding, because the qualifier is not very precise?
Yes, I agree. It's not very precise. That's how it's been modeled so far.
Yeah, but is there a better way? Vladimir Lenin has got the qualifier start time and time.
Yeah,
So
you could add that as well. You could add that as well, right? So you could say that it's named after Peter until 1920. When was it renamed to Leningrad? 28 or whatever. Until then, it was named after Peter, and then it was named after Vladimir Lenin, and then it stopped being named after Lenin in 1991. Now it's back to.
So it would have.
It would have two start times and end times. Yeah, that's fine. That you can do. And this could totally have been done here. Whoever modeled this chose not to. So this brings up the issue of consistency, right? And like Wikipedia, there's no guarantee that people writing about, for example, film would write about it the same way with the same headings, right? And there's also no such guarantee in Wikidata. However, there are systematization efforts. So there are wiki projects on Wikidata, there are templates, there are ways that people are trying to make sure that, yes, we describe being named after in roughly the same way. This is an example of inconsistency. I want to move on. There's plenty of questions around modeling and ontology we could get into, but I want to show you some exciting demos without running out of time. So we know who it was founded by, and the anthem, and the country, and then of course the country that St. Petersburg is in is itself something that has changed, right? The political entity that it was part of. But we're going to scroll past all that because I think you got it. By the way, you see that all of these have edit buttons as well. So we can edit individual statements in Wikidata if something is incorrect or we want to add another start time or something like that. We should also show references. So let's look for a good referenced source. I blame you on no references or anything here. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. So apparently, it is located next to all kinds of bodies of water. One of them is the Griboyedov Canal, named after a Russian author. And I have a reference here. And the reference here, like, how do we know that this city is located near or in or next to the body of water, Griboyedov Canal? Well, in this case, we inferred it from our description of the Kazansky Bridge. Because the bridge is in the city and the bridge is over the river, so the city is next to the river. So this is an example of an inferred piece of information. Another reference might have been, of course, a citation of the New York Times or the Moscow Times, different kind of publication. But it could have been, a source, like a citation, like on Wikipedia. It could have been a URL of where, of a government website that says this is the population of some. Oh yeah, that would have, right? Population would probably have references. Here we go. No, it doesn't. Awesome, because it's 18th century. Yeah. So, by the way, another example of multiple values, right? What is the population of St. Petersburg? Well, that depends on when, right? And Wikidata actually has the historical data of population size for St. Petersburg, not just what is the population right now. It should have had references for all of these, but it doesn't. But at least some of these would have what we would recognize as a more wow, seriously? All right, here we go. 2017, we have 2 references. All right, here we go. So one reference is the Russian Wikipedia says so. That's a terrible reference. I hope we all agree. Not because it's the Russian Wikipedia, because it's Wikipedia. Wikipedia is not itself a reliable source for facts. Do we agree on that? Yes. Yeah, so why are we even saying that? We're just saying, well, we imported this number from the Russian Wikipedia just by mechanical process, and this is like the trace that we left behind. In case we find out this is wrong, now we know we need to fix Russian Wikipedia as well, okay? So that's all it means. It's not actually a reference. But this is a better reference, right? Because this is from the GKS, the Population Bureau.
Statistics Bureau.
Oh, the General Bureau of Statistics of the Russian Federation. And for the population size, that's probably the most reliable source we could wish for, right? That's the official population figure of this country. That is a good source. And we have the URL, we know when we got it. And again, this is just for this number about 2017. So every atom of information on Wikidata can have what librarians would call provenance, right? Where it came from. How do we know? Every single item on Wikidata could have it. As you saw, not everything does have it. But that's like Wikipedia, right? Wikipedia has citations and some things don't have citations. Does it mean they're true? No. Does it mean they're false? No. It just means you don't have a citation. Work in progress, yes. It's a wiki. Edit it, fix it. All right. So moving right ahead to the end of the list of things that, as you can see, there are hundreds and hundreds of pieces of information here already about this one city in Russia, including all of the twin cities, right, of St. Petersburg around the world.
Can you scroll up a bit? There's a curious thing there. A little bit? That's it.
What? Here?
These Q numbers.
Oh, yes.
Why are they Q numbers
Yes.
and not names?
Excellent question. You tell me, why does this say Q4516907?
Which property is this?
Why does it say this? Yeah. The property contains administrative territorial entity. So the values would be smaller administrative entities like, I don't know, neighborhoods or villages, right, inside St. Petersburg. Why does this come up as a Q number?
There's no translation English.
Because it doesn't have an English label, right? I'm using English right now. Thank you. It doesn't have an English label, so it's showing me the Q number because it doesn't know what to call it in English. It probably knows what to call it in Russian, right? There's probably a Russian label. If I switch to Russian, this will probably show up in Russian, as I would expect. So thank you for this quick example. I will show you the Hebrew interface just to shock you. But before that, I want to show you something even more exciting, which is, yes, WIKI. I will tell that story later. Yeah, P is for property and Q is for item. No, there's actually a fun story about the Q, but I'll tell this in just a moment. So this is the end of the statements. At the very end of the statements, there is this well-hidden button for adding a new statement. So this is where you would add a statement if you have a completely new type of thing to say about St. Petersburg. You could also click add value if you just want to add an additional value to an existing property. Like if they just had a new Twin Cities agreement with the city of Brest in France, then you can add it here under add value. But if you have a completely new property to add, you can click this extremely well hidden button. You saw how much I had to scroll to find it. Don't get me started on usability. But this is where the exciting thing happens, at least for you GLAM people. Identifiers, this title identifiers. Actually, it's just more statements, property and value, property and value. But the difference is, whereas these properties and values were describing the city, we're actually adding data about the city, population, mayor, whatever, these are not describing the area. These are magical keys to other data sources describing St. Petersburg. And I call them magical keys. Some of you are already figuring out these are just foreign keys. These are just IDs in other databases. Why are they magical? Well, they are magical because the OSM relation ID, OSM is OpenStreetMap, right? The volunteer-run free geographic map database, right? The OSM ID for St. Petersburg is this number. But if I click this, I am taken to OpenStreetMap to St. Petersburg. That's pretty awesome. I don't have to take the number, figure out where OpenStreetMap is, where to feed that number. I'm just taken to that thing. That's why I call it a magical key, because it kind of is a self-opening key. If this was a Library of Congress ID, I would be taken to the Library of Congress site, to the item about John Smith, if I'm on an item called John Smith, to the Library of Congress item about John Smith, and the correct John Smith. Just imagine how much time that saves me of having to search the Library of Congress for the right John Smith. Someone has already made the mapping for me and gives me, assuming of course the other database is online and linkable, Wikidata, because it loves you and wants you to succeed, will give you that link. So there's a whole list here of IDs for St. Petersburg, and if this was, I'm assuming there would also be somewhere here, yeah, Music Brains ID, IMDb ID, for people, certainly there's always an IMDb ID.
A Dostoevsky book.
Yeah.
That is,
Can be an item, yes.
Yes. You include it here.
Yes,
or in
so I want to
the
show you.
one?
I want to show you an example that would speak to our librarian hearts. We're all librarians here, right? At least in spirit. So I want to look up Tolstoy. The first item I got, I started typing Lev Tolst, and what did I get? An asteroid. That is not what I mean. I'm not looking for the asteroid named Tolstoy, nor am I looking for Posyolok, whatever that is.
Settlement.
Yeah, I'm not looking for some village named Lev Tolstoy. I'm not looking for the district or the railway station or the motor ship named Lev Tolstoy. That's interesting. I guess they're calling him Leo in English?
With an I, probably.
Yeah. See? I called him Lev because I'm used to saying Lev because my mother tongue is Hebrew, and in Hebrew he's called Lev Tolstoy, not Leo Tolstoy. And that was a Hebrew bias in my English usage. Yes, most English speakers would look for Leo Tolstoy. But still, I looked for Lev Tolstoy and I had a bad user experience right now. I think we should add Lev Tolstoy to what English can find him in. But anyway, let's click through to Tolstoy. And just to show you the identifiers for a person that are quite different from the identifiers for a city. So here towards the bottom. So we can see we have his Bashkir Encyclopedia ID. You know, you might not have known there's a Bashkir Encyclopedia, but now not only do you know, but you have a direct link to the Bashkir entry on Tolstoy. And of course you have a VF ID, right? We know and love VF, right? The Great Russian Encyclopedia, the Goodreads author ID. If Tolstoy had a Twitter account, we would have his Twitter handle. A Britannica ID, Nobel Prize ID, etc., etc. All of these foreign keys are here for you to use, making Wikidata a really important nexus, interconnecting disparate databases that may not be connected to each other. Some of them, of course, are, right? But some of them are not. I mean, VF itself is, of course, a nexus of authority files, right, that librarians have created long before Wikidata. But Wikidata connects music brains and Goodreads and VF, right? That's different already. So Wikidata is a much more comprehensive, much more permissive, if you will, resolver or discovery site for the kinds of information I could consume about Tolstoy or St. Petersburg. Does that get the metadata geeks in you excited? This is a really powerful, so in GLAM Wiki, I don't have to explain this a lot. For other people, sometimes I have to explain what's so exciting about all these IDs, but it's super exciting. All right, questions? Yeah.
So you could, right now, just add an additional label for Lev Tolstoy in English?
Yes, let's do that right now. Let's fix Wikidata. So, it does have Lev Nikolaevich Graf Tolstoy, but that's not what I was looking for. So yeah, let's edit. Let's click edit. And in addition to all of these, by the way, including Yiddish.
Wrong Yiddish.
Yeah, wrong Yiddish. Yes, wrong Yiddish. So, I'm just going to add this, so that next time someone makes the mistake I've made, which is a reasonable mistake, not a a cat walking over the keyboard mistake, it'll find Tolstoy. All right. Yes.
I guess we can make a query with the OpenStreetMap ID, for example.
Yeah.
If I am a GLAM, I have
Yes,
the
absolutely.
National Archives, I have my ID for Victor Hugo or for Leo Tolstoy.
Absolutely.
I have just to enter the query and I will find automatically the...
Yes, you can query by all of those IDs. You can query by anything at all you've seen on this page. You can query by the properties, the values, the descriptions, the aliases, the qualifiers of the properties. All of this is addressable and accessible via Sparkle, right, the query language. So, how much time do we have left? We have some more questions, I know. Just a second. We have until 1. Okay, so we have some time for questions and demonstrations. Yes?
I want to ask about the citations.
Yes.
In some Wikipedia, for example, in Wikipedia, it's getting more and more difficult to add some information without some proper citation.
Yeah.
While in Wikidata, it's still very easy.
Yeah.
And I think at the moment it's not that big issue because, as you said in the very beginning, Wikidata is not very popular, and so there are not many vendors and not many bad users. But if Wikidata got more popular in the future,
Yeah.
this would probably be a huge problem.
Absolutely. I agree with you. So, first of all, yes, like Wikipedia in its early days, a lot of the stuff here is not well referenced yet, but will become gradually better and better. It'll also, as you hint, will become more of a target for vandals and deliberate abusers, and we will handle it the way we handle it on Wikipedia, which is through the vigilance of our volunteers. I haven't shown it, but we have a whole bunch of ways to track edits. Every edit made to Wikidata is recorded on the wiki. There are watch lists. You can see, for example, this edit that I just made here in my contributions, right here. You can see this somewhat confusing table, but this very last line here says that right now I have edited the item Leo Tolstoy, and I have added the English alias Lev Tolstoy, right? And if I don't like it, I can even roll it back with one click. I can undo this edit. If I were someone else reviewing my edit. So we have a whole bunch of tools that I won't go into. In addition, in the last few years, we've developed really powerful machine learning powered edit filters that are using the latest machine learning technology to identify statistically probable bad edits, right? Statistically probable. So for example, if someone were to come to the St. Petersburg item and remove all of the 18th century population figures, that's probably a bad edit. It's hard to think of a good reason to do that, right? We have, we're working on tools to increase the ability of the community to maintain the quality of Wikidata. In addition, from the reuser perspective, if you want to build an app or if you want to expose to your library patrons, for example, data from Wikidata, but you don't want to take the risk that someone in your institution will see a vandal edit, right? Like, I don't know, Asaf rules, that someone has made an edit. Even if it's reverted, just a few minutes later, there's a chance it'll slip into your system. So you can, as a reuser, you can only integrate particular subset of Wikidata. For example, you can say, I'm only willing to integrate pieces of data that have a reference. I don't want any of the unreferenced material. Or even only pieces of data that have a reference that isn't from Russian Wikipedia, right? That isn't one of those automated imports, but a proper citation, you can do that. You can say, I only want things that have 3 references or more, if you want to be super conservative. So there are ways to use it, even though, yes, it is still, like Wikipedia, radically open, work in progress, potentially containing mistakes, etc. Like all other databases too. We fix our mistakes quicker. Yes?
How do you handle...
Sorry, does that answer the question?
Yeah. I've got one more, but I can wait.
Okay, yes.
You may have covered, but relationships, they said like family relationships, for example.
Yeah.
There could be like hundreds of different ones.
Sure.
Which on each one you wouldn't have mother, sister, brother, grandfather.
Yeah,
or is there constrained lists of which things saying this is a family relationship and it's this kind of family relationship? How are those sort of things expressed?
So you can kind of decide how obsessively you want to document certain kinds of information. So obviously you can document a person's father, mother, siblings, children, obviously. You could also document that this person is a cousin of that person with the qualifier thrice removed. You could do that. Usually you would not. Usually it's not very interesting, but yes, you could. By the way, the property height is relevant for mountains, not relevant for people, right? Even though all people have a height, we just don't treat that as, really something you describe. Even if we have hundreds and hundreds of pieces of information about Tolstoy, we probably won't mention his height, unless he's a basketball player or a model, right? So there are very particular cases where we care about a piece of data. So if the cousinship matters because they are king of France and the third cousin twice removed is, so you would model that.
And where would those lists of relationships come from? So we'd say,
so there's
a triplet again of saying
there's a property is related to, and then you can add qualifiers to kind of add the nuance. Is related to as a cousin of the 3rd degree. That's where qualifiers really add power. Yeah.
So if I want to, so I have an item that I want to describe some new item.
Yeah.
Are there any places to see like a full ontology? Like where can I see an ontology to describe? Like I want to describe a medieval manuscript.
Yeah.
Like how have they modeled that
so
data? What are the properties available to me?
Absolutely.
Where do you see that?
Picasso is said to have said, good artists imitate, great artists steal.
Yeah.
By the way, that's probably a stolen quotation itself. But anyway, let's take the
it's
Picasso
stealing,
approach.
basically?
So, well, you're not stealing because remember, it's all under CC0. So you are adapting, exactly.
Okay.
You are reusing. So yes, no, but this is seriously, this is a tried and true technique for Wikipedians and Wikidata volunteers. You take a well-modeled item by your judgment, and then you say, all right, that's how they modeled Picasso. Now I will model this less-known painter, and I will, of the, 150 properties that they use to model Picasso, I'll model using these 20 because that's what I have on hand. That's one way to do it. But yes, the need is felt, and right now, just in the last few months, people have been talking about why don't we provide, templates, like model items? And there is, in fact, a brand new property, it's like 2 months old or something, called model item. So you can literally look for some items that the community has designated. This is a model painter item. This is a model film item. So if you're describing a film, this will probably, give you everything you need. Yeah.
I was trying to find a medieval manuscript.
There will be.
Find a model item that I liked, so that's why I was asking.
There will be, and if there isn't, I will just make sure to connect you with some of our medieval manuscript geeks on Wikidata, and they will, because we have some.
They've got to be there, yeah.
Oh yeah, I literally know them, so I can connect you to people who will help you model this. Yeah. What?
On the project sometime you have.
Yes, so Wikidata, like Wikipedia, has, in the kind of discussion areas, it has wiki projects. So, those of us who are really into public transportation, let's get together. That's, by the way, a huge constituency for some reason in the Wikimedia movement. Public transportation geeks, all right? So let's get together and document every single bus line in Delhi. People do that. Create your own niche, create your own little wiki project. You may find fewer medieval manuscript geeks than public transportation geeks, but I will join you. I'm a classicist, like I mentioned, so yeah. All right, yes. Yeah.
It's a GLAM related question, I'm saving people because
תשאל, אני אתרגם, שאל.
כל היצירות אומנות במאה ה-20 נקראות כמעט ללא כותרת. איך מסתדר עם זה? כאילו, אין להם שם אחר, ואז...
קשה. So the question was, well, a huge majority, allegedly, whatever, but a huge amount of artworks in the 20th century does not have a title. The artwork is untitled, right? How do we model that in Wikidata? I mean, yes, it'll be untitled, but then we have, the drop-down, right? The drop-down would be hundreds of items, hundreds of thousands of items maybe. So yes, that's a formidable problem. What you can do is use that description field, right? So you would call it like, untitled 1937 composition by Rothko or whatever. You would need to.
But if you have 20 of those with the same description.
Yeah. So you would.
You have 20 untitled in the same year.
I would suggest you take a page from actual art curators who have been dealing with that problem. Maybe you can share some wisdom on that. No.
I just want to know what Q1 is.
Okay. Okay, excellent question. What is Q1 if Q2 is the Earth? Right? Q1 is the universe. Q1 is the universe. Good guess. Q1 is the universe, and Q42, of course, is Douglas Adams. But other than that, Q numbers are just assigned by the order they are.
Why Q?
Why Q? Why Q? Well, actually, it has to do with Israel. So when we decided to build Wikidata, we were looking for an expert on semantic web linked data technology to build it, and we found a guy who happened to be a world-class expert on those technologies and B, a Wikipedian. His name is Deni Vrandecic. He's from Croatia originally, but grew up in Germany. And he led the team that created Wikidata. Long before he created Wikidata, not so long before, in 2011, so Wikidata was started in 2012, became operational in 2013. So actually shortly before he created Wikidata, in 2011, Wikimania, our big annual conference, was held here in Israel, in Haifa. And Deni, as a Wikipedian, came to the conference, to the Haifa Wikimania. And at the conference, he met an Uzbek Wikipedian, admin of the Uzbek Wikipedia, and long story short, they fell in love. They have 2 adorable kids, and Wiki love, right? And that Uzbek lady Wikipedian's name is Kamara, spelled with a Q. True story. Would I lie to you? It is a totally true story. So it's Deni's little gift of love to his wife. That all the Wikidata items, all 51 million of them, have her initial. Yeah, and it happened here in Israel. So anyway. All right. Other questions before we move on to exciting demos? Yes.
May I ask?
Yeah.
in the for one of the following workshops, we are going to be presented the Sparkle probably. Once I saw it, and I saw that it can do really amazing things. But if I may use my mother as an example, she's a very clever person. But despite her intelligence, I know she will never understand. I saw some tools that try to make it more user-friendly, but not much. Is there any progress in making it more accessible to people who are not able to do any programming? And
So, excellent question. I'll give you several answers. The first answer is, I personally have taught Sparkle to several large groups, including groups that have told me in advance, we are not programmers, we cannot program, we've tried to learn programming, we cannot handle it, so don't expect anything from us. And they left the workshop drunk with power from the Sparkle abilities that I was able to teach them in 2 hours. It's not because I'm a super teacher, it's because Sparkle is really not as hard as programming. Okay? Not even as hard as SQL, right? Which it is often compared to because it is superficially similar to. So people can learn Sparkle. But yes, some people cannot, some people it will be too complicated for. So I'll continue to answer your question. If you can't learn Sparkle, yes, there is room for teaching, for making tools that are more user-friendly. The answer is we, Wikimedia Foundation, Wikimedia Deutschland, are not working on such tools by and large at the moment because we have our hands full doing the more foundational work of making the platform available, adding the multimedia objects, adding the lexicographical data, which we didn't even mention, but is an exciting thing that is happening. So right now we're already able to describe words, not things, not files, but words, including every nuance of the senses of the word, right? A word has 5 different senses. Each sense has different translations into French, etc., and different grammatical forms, blah, blah, blah. So all that is stuff our engineers are working on. And the admittedly necessary kind of more user-friendly application layer of querying Wikidata is left for tool builders, is left for the broader community, people who are technical, people who can program, to build on top of these completely open technologies. Wikidata has a fantastic API. It has client libraries. I don't know if that means, I'm not sure how technical you are, but it has client libraries. It is very easy to program for in Python or Ruby or JavaScript or whatever you use. Even PHP, yes. So it is really up to others to build those more friendly layers on top of Wikidata, at least for now. If nobody else picks it up, I guess in 4 or 5 years, maybe our engineers will get around to building those things. But right now, we're still kind of building the broad infrastructure of the domain.
Sparkle's quite statement-based, isn't it? So actually going from natural language to what is the largest to actually turning into Sparkle.
Yeah, that
probably
would
isn't
be,
a huge
that would be
jump,
the
actually,
holy grail of that, right?
Yeah.
Would be we could just ask a question in English and get an answer. There is already some research level, like academic experiments going on. There's a site called Ask Platypus.
Yeah.
You can Google that, Ask Platypus. And that is already using Wikidata to try to answer plain English questions. And if you ask them like, how old was Abraham Lincoln when he was murdered, you will get an answer. That's the kind of thing it can handle.
I mean, you can pick out the nouns, can't you, and the
verbs,
so that you're kind
it's when you start thinking along those lines, the first few simple cases seem eminently doable, and when you realize that humans, like I said, are squishy and ambiguous, it becomes immediately AI complete.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah.
What's the relation between DBpedia and Wikidata?
DBpedia is an earlier effort to systematize structured data extracted from Wikipedia and a few other sources. So they are comparable, but Wikidata is already larger and more successful than DBpedia and has a broad community of volunteers, whereas DBpedia was created and maintained by academics who are, were operating in the context of a certain academic grant and a certain academic season, and once that's over, it was maintained only by a handful of people, so DBpedia was frozen for a few years. So I don't know the status of DBpedia today. It's kind of
still going on because for some specific needs.
Yeah, it's but if you talk to the people who run DBpedia, they will tell you the reason they're building DBpedia is to explore
they're algorithms for extracting unstructured information into structured information. Think about that. So the research they're doing is on how to create structure out of chaos, and the result is almost a byproduct, right? The result is only to validate the algorithm. So this is very different from Wikidata, which actually tries to collect and give you data, right? By whatever means. Some of it manual, some of it automated. So they're actually different also in the purpose. From the DBpedia maintainer's perspective, they can recreate the whole database from scratch just to test, their latest algorithm for data extraction. You see what I'm saying? There's no guarantee of permanence with the data in DBpedia. So for my money, unless you are explicitly interested in data extraction algorithms, DBpedia doesn't serve you the way Wikidata will.
But the question is about the identifiers, because the DBpedia...
Oh, DBpedia identifiers are mapped to Wikidata.
They match.
No, they don't match. They're mapped to. So ID 17 in DBpedia can be ID 34 in Wikidata. They are linked like the other IDs. So one of the identifiers that we saw at the bottom of the item can be a DBpedia ID. Okay, so if you have, for example, your database.
Because in the Wikidata cloud, one of the main cores is DBpedia in terms of having stable identifiers. And so you said the Wikidata maps on it, but it's still the core is the identifiers of Wikipedia, or I'm wrong?
It is mapping two identifiers on DBpedia. Yeah, but they're not the same. Wikidata has its SKU numbers. Maybe I'm missing your question, I'm sorry. Anyway, let's head on to some examples of Wikidata in practice. So, what? Yes, we don't have a lot of time. So I will skip the embedding data from Wikidata on the wiki because I think most of you are less interested in that, but we can cover that later. And again, the slides are linked from the program, so you can just click this yourself. I do want to show you this. So this is an awesome little feature built on top of Wikidata. And I will take you to the Esperanto Wikipedia. How is your Esperanto? Not so good? At least you can read it, right? So it's in Latin letters. So this is the Esperanto Wikipedia, and this is the search screen of the Esperanto Wikipedia. I have searched for the name Helen DeWitt. Helen DeWitt is an American author I'm particularly fond of, and unfortunately, but usefully for my presentation, no one has written about her on the Esperanto Wikipedia yet. There is an English Wikipedia article, a Hebrew Wikipedia article, an Estonian Wikipedia article, but not Esperanto. Okay? So there's nothing to find on Esperanto Wikipedia. If I speak only Esperanto, or I don't know, only Slovak in Esperanto, but not English, I cannot find information about her. So this is what this page says. It says, I cannot find Helen DeWitt. Maybe you meant Helena DeWitt. I did not. I can create the page Helen DeWitt. This is what Wikipedia tells you when it can't find anything. Go ahead and create the article. But it also says, down here, it also says, you know what? I have some data about Helen DeWitt, about this topic, that I can give you in the meantime. Better than nothing. If I click that, something amazing happens. If I click that, I get this page. I'm still on the Esperanto Wikipedia. Okay? I got this page, which is an article placeholder. Okay? This is not an article, but it's a placeholder for an article generated for me from Wikidata in Esperanto. And it is generated in Esperanto without any of the people who contributed this information knowing Esperanto, which is kind of amazing. So imagine me, the person who speaks only, I don't know, Slovak and Esperanto, right? English is not accessible to me. This is what I can learn about this lady. I can learn she's a human, it's not a city, it's not a mountain, right? She's a woman, she's Usono, she's from the US, right? Her first name is Helen, her last name is DeWitt. You can see it's not an article, it's kind of a table, it's properties and values. I can see what she looks like. I can see a bunch of external identifiers for her.
so that if I speak French, the BNF is ready to give me information, which I might not have been able to find without this little pointer, right? I know where she was born, I know when she was born, I know the languages she speaks. Yes, she speaks all those languages. She's an impressive lady. I know what she does. She's an author, a novelist, and I'm not sure what verkisto is. The genre is novel. I even have, check it out, a voice recording that a certain volunteer named Asaf once recorded.
This is Helen DeWitt. It's May 12, 2015. A good samurai who carried blur.
Yeah, so I even have a voice sample of this lady in the Esperanto Wikipedia, which does not have a single piece of data about her. Nobody in the Esperanto community even knows I'm doing this. How amazing is that? And I know where she was educated, the books she wrote, her official website, her official blog, and I have references. Where did these come from? Where everything else came from. It comes from Wikidata. These are the references from the Wikidata statements just arranged for me like a Wikipedia article. So again, it's not a narrative article in Esperanto. And when someone writes an article about her in Esperanto, we'll be glad to never see this again. But until then, I got a whole bunch of information that I just couldn't get any other way. Is that clear, this example? So this works for anything that we cannot find on Esperanto Wikipedia, but that is documented in some way on Wikidata. Now, how was it able to generate it in Esperanto? Well, it's not artificial intelligence. Someone once taught Wikidata how to say American in Esperanto, not in the context of Helen DeWitt. And that's enough to generate these pieces of data. That's not a big deal. Yeah, so questions, yes?
This page, this link is on the Wikipedia page.
Yes, it's on the search results page.
Search results
So when there isn't an item, right?
Yeah.
This says I couldn't find what you were looking for.
Okay.
Maybe you want these data. Now it is an optional feature, and not all Wikipedias have it.
Okay.
That's why I'm demonstrating it on the Esperanto Wikipedia.
Okay.
That's one of the Wikipedias that chose to enable it. Is it working in French? No.
Because it's a manner, because Wikidata is more open about criteria of eligibility.
Yeah.
So it's a manner to pass over this criteria
Yes,
of
of course.
eligibility into Wikipedia.
Yeah.
That's why it's not activity Wikipedia.
Yeah, so this is, of course, much more useful for smaller languages, like Esperanto, like Estonian. It's working on the Estonian wiki. There's only 1 million speakers of Estonian in the world, right? They're unlikely to ever catch up with English Wikipedia. But in the meantime, they can generate a whole lot of basic information in Estonian just from the work the rest of us are doing on Wikidata, not speaking a word of Estonian, right? All they need to do is just translate those bits, right? The names of the language, the names of the countries, right? Into Estonian. So yes, other wikis can choose to enable this feature. I just wanted to show you this in Wikimedia use of Wikidata. We have just a few minutes. So do you agree Wikidata is love? Awesome. What? Oh, okay. What? Wikidata has an API for those of you who are programmers or have some influence on programmers. Send them this way. It's a well-documented API. It has a sandbox. It's very generous. It doesn't have rate limits. It's fun to program to. I know because I have. So here are some other examples of amazing things people have built on top of Wikidata. Remember, Wikidata is just a platform for collecting and querying the data, but you can build on top of that an application for genome scientists. You know, Wikidata itself doesn't look like a genome scientist application, but Wikigenomes does. If the gods of the internet will smile. Yeah. So this thing, looks nothing like Wikidata. I don't know anything about genes, but Helicobacter is some kind of bacteria, and this thing that I'm guessing makes sense to biologists. This thing, about the sequence of the genome of the Helicobacter comes from Wikidata. This data is recorded on Wikidata, and it's pulled out of Wikidata using some programming that someone has done into this useful for biologists site.
you see what I'm saying? So using Wikidata as is would not be convenient for a scientist, but this is interesting. And Wikidata can be the platform. So yeah, I don't even know how to demonstrate this intelligently, but these swear words, as you can see, they all come from Wikidata, and if you click, you actually get to the Wikidata item about this particular synthase, whatever that is. All right, so it really is powered by Wikidata. So that's just one example. Something that is more readily understandable is this system, which was built by one guy, by one volunteer, called Krotos. Yes.
Yes.
Right. This is an art search engine entirely powered by Wikidata. So again, Wikidata itself is not a good art search engine, but it's a platform that you can build an art search engine on top of. So we can now, so you see this already indexes 134,000 artworks, and 66,000 of them have HD images right here on this system. And we can say, I don't know, I want Michelangelo, right? I have a drop-down coming from Wikidata, of course. Yes, I don't mean Michelangelo Serposi, I mean, the Michelangelo. And here's a bunch of stuff from Michelangelo. And of course, it has data. It has a link to Wikidata, to the item about this artwork in Wikidata, a link to Commons, a link to Wikipedia, because this particular artwork itself has a Wikipedia article. Of course, not every painting has a Wikipedia article. I have some metadata here about the piece. I can, of course, click it and get a better version of it. And I can do things that are useful in an art search engine that aren't provided for me in Wikidata. For example, I can say, you know what? I only want the drawings, not the sculptures. Right? And now I have filtered the results to only the drawings of Michelangelo. You get the idea. There's a whole system here that was built for the needs of people who are, I have a timeline there. I can say, give me only the works he's done until 1493. These are things that this volunteer built for browsing artworks. Another volunteer built, or not volunteer, scientist built Wikigenome, and you or your colleagues could build other things on top of Wikidata. That's what I meant when I said we're leaving these things to the public, to the application builders. We cannot build all those things at the moment. We're still working on the infrastructure. But already people are building amazing things on top of Wikidata. There's a link for Ask Platypus, which you can try. Is this working? There were issues with it. Yeah, so I don't know if you know this. It was popular in Israel and it's popular in Germany. In Israel it's called Eretz Ir, Stadt, Land, Wikidata. So this is just a game where you randomize a letter, and then every player has to think of a city and a country and a fish type or whatever, several categories. Oh, Americans call it categories, I think, right? So this is like a categories game that was built on top of Wikidata. It's a super trivial application. All it does is it picks a letter, right? The letter now is S, and I have to type in a city beginning with S, a country beginning with S, a river beginning with S, and a occupation, beruf, an occupation, like a profession beginning with S. Now, I just type stuff, and it checks. This is a German tool, a German volunteer built it, so it checks German labels on Wikidata, right? And if there exists a river that begins with S with the name I gave, then I get the points. The point is, this was just a trivial toy example, but just an amazing little toy or educational thing that you can build on top of Wikidata. I hope you're beginning to see the world of possibilities. I'm deliberately not showing you the amazing query examples because there's a whole workshop on the queries. But properly, that has to be part of a Wikidata introduction. Yes?
Just a quick question. Is mix and match a good entry to Wikidata or just a game?
A mix and match, is it a good what?
A good entry, a good way to...
Entry?
Yeah, entry.
Yes, so that's what's called an excellent question because I have a slide about it. Yeah, mix and match. So mix and match is also a tool built by a volunteer. A volunteer already mentioned this morning. His name is Magnus. and he's the most accomplished tool builder in the Wikimedia movement. He's built hundreds of tools, and they're amazing. And this tool, called Mix and Match, is of particular interest to GLAM people from GLAM institutions, because this is a tool for vocabulary alignment. Not just vocabulary, actually, also authority alignment. So you have a database of people or books or artworks or whatever, some of which is definitely covered on Wikidata. We know that some of it will have a Wikidata QID, and some of it won't but should, right? Like nobody got around to creating it, but it should be covered on Wikidata, and maybe some of it is irrelevant for, you can come in. Maybe some of it, maybe shouldn't be on Wikidata. So this tool is designed to help you, mix and match. So let's demonstrate this in just a few minutes. There are seats, just come and join us. So this is the tool, and it already contains several hundred databases, or rather exports of IDs and information from databases, that you can kind of put side by side with Wikidata and begin to align. So what topic would you like to try? Art, biography, books. Let's go with biography. There's 20 to choose from. So we have 500 and whatever sets of biographical data. For example, a National Gallery artist, right? We got from the National Gallery in London, we got a list of all their artists with the artist IDs, and we wanted to make sure that, those identifiers at the bottom of a Wikidata item, right? That we have a Wikidata item for all of these artists. And this particular one, as you can see, has 96% completion. So 96% of the whole set of National Gallery IDs has been linked to the right Wikidata item already. Meaning, if you go to the Wikidata item about one of those artists, one of the identifiers there will be a National Gallery ID. And of course, now the National Gallery itself, if it so chooses, can change its website so that it offers its visitors a link to Wikidata, or through Wikidata, a link to Wikipedia in a certain language. Yes, we are out of time, so I can just show you the parting shot here. Let's look at the Royal Society. Royal Society, Fellows of the Royal Society, 100% matched. So we're already over time, so I'll just show you. Another thing you can get from this tool is the statistics. So of all of the Fellows of the Royal Society in the UK, you can see that 15 of them are covered on Afrikaans Wiki, and 300 of them have articles on Arabic Wikipedia. So you can just kind of get a snapshot of, and this can be on your data set, on your, you can just get a snapshot of how well covered your stuff is on Wikipedia in the various languages, all through the links that are created in Wikidata. So we don't have time to show you how mix and match works. It's not too complicated, but we need 15 minutes to demonstrate it. We can do it, later during a break. Find me in the evening, I'll show it to you. Thank you very much for your attention. Go edit Wikidata now that you have the power. Use it for good and not for evil. And there is a recorded version of something like this talk at this URL. Again, the slides are linked from the program, so you don't have to copy it. Enjoy.
Thank you.
And now we have the lunch break.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, it's not me. It's not me. I'm just.
Repeat what? Tomorrow or the it's not me. It's Martin.
There's also. No, there's a presentation that's called by the exercise.
Sparkle.
Yeah, but you can just put it right here.
הרבה בעיות?
Several hours
אתה לא מדבר על זה עם הכיסוי שלנו? זה רען בו, לא רען. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know what it is?
No, no, no where it is.
Oh, everything is vegetarian.
Everything is vegetarian. Okay.
Oh, everything is
Thank you.
vegetarian.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I guess that Wikidata editors and Google processes so something else. But it can, yes, it can absolutely has already.
And the problem is that sources should is a much larger inflow.
Well, first you need to understand the power of these things so that you can show them. You need to go to the Sparkle workshop and learn how to use it. You need to look at the program. I don't remember exactly. It's not today, it's tomorrow or the day after. And it's not by me. But if you miss it, there's a recorded version by me. You can look at my YouTube page. There's a link there to a video of me. Because this will help you actually give a live demo, you know, in context. Like if you're doing it in a particular Nigerian state, you can show them a query about that state. It's more exciting than seeing a example of something.
This edit may be problematic.
Lot of course, there will be a lot of lives of perfect ones.
Yeah.
You know that will happen.
Thank you. More clever than artificial intelligence. And once they learn the algorithm how it works, they will also find out how to work around the algorithm.